Okay, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the launch of the Oxford Internet Survey 2013. I'm Helen Margetts. I'm Director of the Oxford Internet Institute, which I hope that most of you know is a multidisciplinary department of the University of Oxford. Basically, we research and study life on the internet, life off the internet, life with the internet, all aspects of the relationship between society and the internet. So obviously for us to have this long-running flagship program, the biannual Oxford Internet Survey, is a wonderful thing, a blessing for which we thank our sponsors very much. It's actually the 10th birthday of OxIS. I think they say in Britain when you've done I think other people in other countries say of Britain that when you've done something twice, it's a tradition, and when you've done something for 10 years, it's an institution. So in those terms, OxIS is now an institution, and this is the 6th report. One of the amazing things about thinking about that, about thinking when OxIS started, is just how many of the things that we all regularly use on the internet now and perceive of kind of life-changing on the internet have been started in those 10 years since OxIS started. And if anybody fancies sort of experiencing that, check out the new iBook that we are launching both for the iPad and for Android, which has it's for OxIS, but it has a nice timeline showing exactly when everything came on board. There's a preview of it out there. We'll launch it, of course, on Twitter in the next week or so, but if you'd like to check out the preview, have a look when we stop for drinks. Anyway, let's move straight on to start hearing about the findings of the most recent Oxford Internet Survey. I'll just say what's going to happen. Before I do that, I'd like to give a really big thanks to Ofcom for hosting this event. It couldn't be a better place to have it. It's the hub of communications research in the city, so obviously it's the place to be. I shall now hand over to Professor Bill Dutton, who's going to regale us with the findings. He's only got 6 minutes, apparently, and of this survey. There's also going to be some kind of test or quiz where you have to work out what culture somebody belongs to, what internet culture somebody belongs to, so get ready for that. And then we're going to move on to a panel discussion chaired by Dr. Vicky Nash of the Oxford Internet Institute, and then we'll open things to the floor, and then we're going to have some drinks around about 6:30, 6:45, so don't go away. And I'll hand over to Bill.
Thank you, Helen. It is great. I mean, 10 years of OxIS has a lot of findings, and 6 minutes is going to be a challenge. But what I want to talk about are the 5 cultures of the internet. I'll mention more than that, but I think that's the most interesting thing that's come out of our survey this time. But I want to thank particularly for this survey was supported. I mean, Ofcom not only helped with the hosting this launch, but it also helped support the survey itself, along with Nominet Trust, and we'll hear from people from Nominet Trust and Ofcom here today, and also .rural. We could not have done this survey, I think, without all of these supporters, and .rural, of course, is part of the UK Research Council's digital economy program, and they not only supported us, but it was a collaborative project, and this whole OxIS venture is a collaborative project from year one. We're delighted to have such people with us. I just want to mention some of the highlights of the OxIS survey because I don't want them to be lost, and hopefully some of them will be picked up by the panel and discussion. But a couple of them, the digital divides never leave us, but it's quite impressive, I think, that we were not expecting an uptake in the percentage of people online, but it really has moved from 73% 2 years ago to 78%. And we were not expecting that kind of a rise, but I think with tablets and a variety of factors have led groups to come online. And who are the groups that have made that difference in terms of the rise of internet use? Those who you may not expect, the most difficult groups. So the low-income groups, those with the least schooling, disabled people, and also retired and older people. So in each of those categories, there was a rise in access to the internet. Real progress on the digital divide. Now there are probably 100, every table shows a trend. There are 100 trends that are going on in the OxIS survey. So I just want to mention two, and one is a continuing rise of the next generation user. In 2011, we identified through OxIS what we call the next generation user. And we try to avoid this notion that it's just a shift to mobile internet or something, because we don't think it is. It's actually the next generation user has maybe 2 to 3 or more devices in the home that they use, plus they have 1 or more portable devices that enable them to use the internet on the move. So there are multiple devices that enable the internet to be more integrated in the everyday life and work 24/7 of individuals. And now it's gone from 32% of the UK being next generation users to 52%. That's 67% of internet users are next generation users. It's a phenomenal trend, and it must have to be connected with the rise of internet users generally. The second trend was also a surprise, which was a potential plateau in the diffusion of social media. So Facebook, Twitter, so forth, even though it's certainly still a rage among people who are avid users, the proportion of people in the UK that are using social media has sort of plateaued at about 60%. That was a surprise and raises questions about what's going on in that area, and maybe the panel can deal with it. But I think the most interesting thing to me is the survey enabled us to move to identifying cultures of the internet. I've always been unhappy with the way in which we describe users as like an internet user is an internet user, or sometimes we use the categories, well, they're broadband versus narrowband users, or even next generation user is somewhat tied to the technology. And when you talk to people and you listen to public policy debates, you realize that there are people who have different values and interests and attitudes about the internet, and they're not reflected in these categories. We think maybe all users are enthusiastic about the internet. So we took a very inductive approach to identifying 5 cultures. And I hope you come up with better names, but I'm happy to debate anybody. I'll buy anybody a cup of coffee that has a better name for any of our cultures. But we took a completely inductive approach. We had 14 items that a lot of items got thrown on the floor, but 14 items that developed over the 10 years of the OII about attitudes, beliefs about the internet, mainly attitudinal items, Likert types indicators. We factor analyzed those to look at principal component analysis of those 14 items to have 4 factors. We then clustered users by users who tended to answer questions in the same way on those 4 dimensions, so that they clustered together on those 4 dimensions. And there were 5 distinctive clusters. And again, that analysis had a lot of iteration and so forth, but we found one that seemed to have be the most well-defined and reliable among those. And we fooled with different numbers of dimensions and so forth. But these 5 cultures reflect the diversity of the attitudes of users of the internet. Now I want to give you a snapshot. They're really complex. They involve a number of items in different dimensions, but I'll give you characterize each. And listen carefully, because there will be a quiz. There will be a quiz, but you won't be penalized, and you won't be embarrassed if you don't know anything, because it'll be a silent quiz, but I will quiz you on this. The immersives are often the people we usually think about. They're about 12% of the users in the UK. And they are those who are very comfortable and happy to be online. They view online as a place to pass time, to kill time, to socialize. It's a place to meet people. And it's also a place they get things done. The first place they think of getting things done is online. The internet is under their control. The internet is controlled by them, and they can do what they wish. They tend to be younger, urban. They're also positive about technology generally, as technology can solve problems. They use the internet higher than most groups for entertainment, but also producing content. They're most likely to produce content, and they're very high as next generation users, multiple devices. The techno-pragmatists are very interesting because they are also very positive about the internet, but not as a place to socialize or to kill time or to pass time. The techno-pragmatists are very instrumental. They use the internet to save time, to do something. I've got to get something done. I'll go to the internet. That's faster. Off we go. I'm not going to waste my time on social media or what have you. They're actually very instrumental in their use. They tend to be middle-aged, more likely to be employed, managerial professional occupations, and they tend to be very high in the use of the internet for search related to news, travel, settling arguments with your family. Okay, I'm going to check that fact, and that saves a lot of time and anguish in a family if you can just check the fact right there. And looking for health information. So very instrumental, very steered, but not a place to kill time at all. The third group are the cyber savvy. I use that as sort of an analogy to streetwise. I don't mean that they are very enthusiastic about the internet. They see it as a place to pass time, to meet people, but also a place where they can save time and get things done. At the same time, they perceive risks, so that they are more likely to say that they recognize that there might be immoral material online, that they can be frustrated with its use, that it can waste their time. So they have an ambivalence about the internet, but I think it's an ambivalence that it's not that they don't know what to do. They're enthusiastic, they're high on all of these things. But I think they know the risks, and they do this. For example, these are people who are more likely to say they gamble online, more likely to sell things online. Shopping, selling, things that have risk, and they probably have had problems online, and they're streetwise, but they love the internet. They still find the internet extremely positive. That's about 19% of users. And then the largest group of users are the cyber moderates, and very interestingly, they are not extremely negative, but they're not extremely positive either. They tend to be moderate in their attitudes about the internet, both positive and negative. So they tend to be older, retired people, more likely to be middle income, and they tend to use a lot of e-government or civic participation kinds of activities, not entertainment and music and so forth, but they will do things that make, perhaps the internet is one of the ways they can do this, but they are not, they're not enthusiastic in terms of uploading content or entertaining themselves online. So they get it, they use it, but they are not going to write home about the internet or proselytize others about the internet at all. And then perhaps one of the most interesting groups are the adigitals, I think. They are online, but they don't like it, all right? They don't enjoy being online. It's not a way for them to save time. They don't think this is a way to save time. In fact, they're frustrated often for being online. And they also think that there's a lot of immoral material online. And so to them, I think the opposite, the immersives, these are individuals who think the technology is out of control. It's not under their control. Somehow they're being left out, and it's a frustrating experience for them. They tend to be 45 and over or managerial and professional, and often living in urban areas. So they, in a way, they're some of the more, central to society in terms of managerial, professional, and urban managers and professionals, but online, despite their frustrations with the internet. You can see that the moderates are sizable relative to all the other categories, which worries me because I think, when we think of, well, I'm just maybe internationally competitive, but I think when you see how much online content production and innovation goes on, say, in China and Brazil and some of the other, you see that it's much lower in the UK and much of Europe, and it's probably because we have a large proportion of moderates, not immersives, and people who have a more enthusiastic view of the internet and see what it can do. And just to rid you of one expectation, one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because of the view that the real cyber culture of the internet are the born digitals. And we disagree. Well, a lot of research, Rebecca Einen, who's here, and others have looked at the born digital, and there are a lot of empirical weaknesses to that argument. And here's one. You can see that the immersives are more, it's more likely that a young person is an immersive. But you see immersives among all the age groups. And even the moderates, you see a large proportion of the cyber moderates as younger people. So that there's real diversity among younger people. And I think the born digital notion of a digital culture is too simplistic, and it's not empirically supportable. So this gives, but it's in the right direction of saying that people approach the internet differently, and there's some who are very enthusiastic and feel comfortable with the internet, but it's not simply because you were born at a certain time. That contributes to it. Okay, but anyway, Vicki, please take over.
Okay, come on up. Yeah, I had to wake you up though. So there are hundreds of them. We're not going to hog the platform too much, but I am going to take a bit of time to get some responses from our great panel, whom I'm going to introduce in a second. And then we're going to make sure that we have some time for Q&A at the end, which can be questions, clarifications, comments, reactions, but I promise that you will have a chance to have some feedback too. So without further ado, I shall go along this line, and you will see that there is a theme amongst my panellists tonight, actually. At the end down here, we have a good friend of mine I've known for quite some time now. I love the fact that you advertise yourself, Bill Thompson, as having worked in and around the internet since 1984. I know, so you can provide the longitudinal perspective, I think, on the work that we're presenting tonight. For those that don't know him, Bill is a fantastic commentator, interpreter, writer about all things internet. Has been a tech journalist at The Guardian. You may see him currently on the World Service's BBC Click, but sort of main role at the moment is head of partnership development at the BBC Archive Development Group, but also visiting professor at the Royal College of Art. How did I not know that? Then sitting next to Bill, we have Holly Goodier, delighted to have you here too, who is Director of Marketing and Audiences at BBC Future Media. So you are, as far as I understand it, you're responsible really, aren't you, for undertaking and leading all the research and planning and analysis of BBC audiences across all digital media, which is a major responsibility. Previously worked in advertising. Next to you, we have James Thickett from Ofcom, where it's a great title, Director of Nations. I'm sorry, but that does make you sound like, you ought to be king. All right, Director of Nations and Market Development, to give you your complete role, where again, you're leading a couple of teams, I gather, which undertake all sort of market research, market intelligence analysis that inform all the policy development that goes on here at Ofcom. A little fact I'm going to throw in so you can see what the theme might be: previously controller of business strategy at BBC. So I have, it seems, got 3 people with BBC connections on the panel with me. Grant, though, has no connection to the BBC, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so then we're all right. Grant Blank, colleague of mine at the OII, he's our survey research fellow. I'm going to ask all three over here, if you like, for sort of responses to the research. I'm not going to ask Grant for another presentation, but he'll have a chance, if you like, to comment on their responses and your questions. Okay, who would like to go first? Bill, I'm going to pick on you simply because you're at the end of the line. You're looking ready. So, yeah.
But I'm a hack. I'm a pundit. I was going to listen to these guys and then just steal all their good ideas, present them as if they were mine because I spoke last, and you'd all be vague about who actually said it, so I'd get the credit. I've been a commentator for many years, and we aren't going to have to speak. I can do that. So as you mentioned, I've been using this thing called the internet since 1984, which is when it was about a year old, because I was a student at Cambridge University and we had access there, though I didn't know it was the internet, it was just a network. And then I worked for Acorn Computers in Cambridge, and we also had access to the internet because we were involved in a European research project. And this was before the internet was commercialized, and again, the network was just there for us. And for me, the defining thing about my particular engagement with all forms of the internet has been that it's not been interesting or exceptional or unusual, it has just been part of the given for me. And so it's been important for me to observe how other people, as they come online, engage with these technologies, and how many people have tried to present it as somehow magical, when in fact it isn't, when it is just the thing that's there that facilitates certain behaviours. So what I've seen as cyberculture has emerged is that it was always fragmented, but now it's impossible to ignore that fragmentation. And what 10 years of research from OII and what other research from many other people has demonstrated is there never was an homogeneous internet culture, but geeks like me used to be so dominant that you couldn't see any of our other characteristics, because I'm a human being, like you. If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh? If you abuse me on Facebook, do I not have a wry smile of amusement? You know, the point is that it's always been that case. But the people like me, the people with a strong technical background, dominated for so many years, it was impossible to see the rest. That's no longer the case. Now we have a situation where, although many of us live in this liminal space between being online and offline, the internet using community is so large, 80%, 78, 80% in the UK. The uses of the network are so broad that we need the deep analysis that OxIS brings to a very, very complex area. However, the picture is not at all simple. And the report is fantastic, and I read it carefully, and there's a whole load of great data in there, and some of those figures leap out at me. But it feels a bit like one of the early X-ray crystallographs. You know, what you're doing in this survey is taking 2,000 people, an extra 500 people, shining X-rays on them, bouncing them off, and then interpreting the photographic plates, hoping to understand the composition of a really complex crystalline mineral. And you don't yet have that Watson and Crick moment where it becomes apparent what is really going on. There may be a reason for that. That's one thing we can explore. It may be that there is nothing going on, as in there's nothing to find, or it may be there's something going on that is so simple we can't yet see it. Speculate on that later. So what we can do with the data is use it to illuminate our own prejudices, that's what I do as a journalist, but also use it to challenge them. And I think there's a whole load of things in the report that can probably provide the fuel for our discussion. So for example, the technologies themselves are changing so quickly that people's engagement with those technologies will be shaped by the affordances of the new tools, and it's very hard in a 2-yearly survey to catch that. So the first person from Media Lives that we heard of, she was referring to WhatsApp. You didn't name WhatsApp directly, but the way of creating a group of friends that you can send messages to, that's WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a radical and transformative tool that replaces Facebook in the social lives of many young people, but it's too new to be captured effectively in the research you're doing. It may also be the reason why you can say that social network use is plateauing. What's plateauing is Facebook, because nothing's come to replace Facebook, and Facebook is so tedious we only use it because we really feel we have to. The other things sit outside your criteria because the people who are using them don't think of them as being social network sites. So all of these complications emerge from a close analysis of the data, which is why it's such valuable data. A friend of mine skimmed through the report earlier today and said, this is really great, but where are the answers? I said, it's not there to give the answers, it's there to help you formulate your answers to the really hard questions. That's why it's so valuable. Issues like what I call the refuse nets, those people who choose not to go online. Now, I think there is a solution to that problem. I think many of them will eventually be proxied, as in they'll have other people who use the net for them, and the rest will die. And problem solved. So, we don't need to spend that much time caring too much about what we do after the next 5 or 10 years. Because within 5 or 10 years, use of the net in your daily life will be so integral, it'll be like the few people who don't drive a car. You know they're just being pretentious because their entire existence relies on the existence of the automobile. They have their shopping delivered by a Sainsbury's van. They get lifts from their friends. They're just trying to show off. Similarly, those people who claim they never use the internet will, in 5 years' time, be lying. And so they can be disregarded from your survey. That's the sort of issue that I think will become important. I think the term first generation, next generation is going to be dangerous by the next survey. And you need to think carefully about how you use it, because anything which requires next, because there'll be a next generation by then. What are you going to call them? The tertiary users? You very quickly get tied into a terminology that is not scalable. Ask any programmer. Once you lock some things down, you want to be very, very careful. And you don't have a responsive design for your survey, to use a web term. Thank you for the laugh at the back there. It's nice to know there's somebody like me in the audience. You don't have a responsive design yet for your survey, and you need to have that. And I'd like to finish, because it's normal for left-leaning journalists like me to quote George Orwell on occasions like this, whenever we penetrate Ofcom towers, with a quote from George Orwell, the great writer of An Observer, but it's not the one you're expecting. It's the end of Animal Farm. The Oxford Internet Institute looked from the internet to the world, and the world to the internet, and from the world to the internet again, but already it was impossible to say which was which. Thank you.
I'm really glad I made you go first. Holly, dare I say?
So perfect. I realise that the things that I want to say will be quite similar to yours, and I hope not because of the BBC connection, but because of our general geekery, I think. So bear with me. So in reading the report, I think it's really great work. I think it's great work because it's useful. It chimes with a lot of the work that we've done at the BBC, because I'm sure, as you'd imagine, we're, like OxIS, interested in the why of internet behaviour. So the attitudes, needs, motivations, just as much as we are the what, whether that's mobile, tablet penetration, etc. So it's really good to see this report bring together both of those two elements. And our role at the BBC is to uncover insights like this, but also to try and apply them practically, whether that's to the development of the research craft or to the creation of programs, websites, whatever that might be. So it's with that bias or mindset that I've seen sort of 4 different perspectives on the report. I'll go through them relatively briefly. One is about what it says to me about the people of the UK. The second are implications for the craft of research. The third is a thought about what it says about the media industry at large. And the fourth, thoughts about what it might mean for what we should make as a result of this. As Bill rightly says, the answers aren't in there, but it provokes some really good questions. So, on to the people of the UK. The first obvious thing for me, it's been said before me, that we are now at such a high level of penetration, internet use is just normal. It is just an everyday part of everybody's lives. And to that point, it means that the world now and our internet use is one of more and more choices, more sophisticated choices, because they're reflections of who we are and how we want to live our lives, and indeed how we want the internet to fit in or not to our daily lives. So for me now, what's lovely about this is it reflects that the story is less about the internet and more about people themselves. And it's that then makes me think about the implications for research. Because this, for me, is sort of a gentle word of caution and a quiet plea. Now is a really unique time in that we are able more than ever before to monitor, observe, understand and respond to the absolute minutiae of everyone's action via digital media. quantitative data is king. And for me, that's really exciting, but only tells part of the story. And why it was lovely to see the Ofcom Lives vignettes in partnership with this work. Because for me, it's vital that we bring the human experience of the internet to life too. So I think that the OxIS report has made really positive strides. The introduction of cultures is incredibly helpful, but I challenge next time to bring this more viscerally to life, the nature of our human reaction, emotion and involvement with the internet. And indulge me a little bit with a story this morning. Someone in my team sent round to the gang a wonderful YouTube video of a young woman quitting her job. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet, but I have to just check the title. It is called An Interpretive Dance for My Boss, set to Kanye West Gone. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. For me, it says so much about what it means to be a young person who is creatively enabled by digital media, about lines of communication between your boss and others, about social identity, and so much more. So, in a sort of a weird way, forgive the leap, but the likes of BuzzFeed, YouTube, people themselves are getting more and more adept at being commentators, curators of what it means to tell the story of the human experience online, more so arguably than us as the research community as a whole, which for me feels both good and a little bit odd. So I think if we're to help people in the industry make positive choices about digital media, to do that we've got to do it with the colour and the range of the people themselves. The future of our craft has to be about people plus data. Which leads me to our last two observations, which I'll go really quickly. First is the internet is normalised. And hackers are increasingly difficult to find, as the report so wonderfully suggests. But what does that mean then for the media industry at large? Because arguably for me what it means is that the people who are making decisions about digital media are much more mixed now too. So lots of them won't be tech experts or evangelists, some will be. But others will be nervous about it as well, like the A-Digitals are. And surely that will influence the decisions they make about digital media and the role it should play in society. I don't know, but I think it would be fascinating to see what this segmentation would look like if we applied it to the media industry versus the population at large. And then last but not least is a thought about what it means or might mean about what we make, the products, services and brands that are possible through the internet. Because the OxIS report reminds us that everyone is online, and those who are span a massive spectrum of needs, behaviours, attitudes. And I think that there will always be a spectrum, as Bill says, but I think it's our job, the industry's responsibility, to find ways that we can consider and cater for everyone. So in summary, I think there is so much to be gained from the OxIS report. I think it's not just about the stats and the insights, valuable as they are, but I think also about how it can help us progress both the craft of what it means to understand and make for the people of the UK.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So James, I'm sorry that we've left such a sort of flaming lefty quoting Orwell into Ofcom, but if you can...
I could talk about infrastructure if you want, but that's all that's left. Just a few words. I mean, we've been working with you almost since the beginning, I think, and we find the report incredibly valuable because obviously we do a load of research in this area as well, but it's the way you juxtapose your data with the work that we're doing is valuable for all our teams and for all the work that we do. What's really amazing for us, and looking back over 10 years, is what should be a market that's now, reaching maturity, actually is changing so much. And I will talk about infrastructure because I've been talking about it all day. But just a couple of things to mention. What's going on at the moment? At the moment, for the first time, we are likely to see universal broadband availability within the next couple of years. So for the first time, we actually have a government that's recognised that it's a good thing for everybody to have access to the internet. I mean, it's currently about 95%, but getting to that last 5% is going to be very difficult, but it could be transformational in terms of getting to that last 20% of people who still don't get it, your A-digitals. And on top of that, we've also seen very quickly Britain go from being the laggard to being ahead of the pack in the rollout of superfast broadband. And we're likely to see 90% of homes get access to superfast broadband in the next 2 or 3 years. And we already know from our research that 20% of the UK population now have it. And they're doing all sorts of amazing things, like watching videos. So, you know, the sky's the limit. But who knows what they may be doing with it tomorrow. But we know they're watching videos and really enjoying them at the moment. And then the other big thing from an infrastructure point of view is early this year, we ran our auctions for 4G spectrum. And the big mobile phone operators are now rolling out 4G services. EE have been ahead of the pack on this. Our early research on 4G is that people are really happy with the speeds and happy with what it enables them to do. And we think that will have a transformational effect on how people access the internet as well. And what it's all doing is adding to this really changeable environment where people are changing the devices that they use to access the internet. And so people are deserting their desktops en masse, and even laptops now seem to have peaked. Use on laptops seems to have got over its peak, and they're using smartphones and tablets. And 2 years ago, smartphones were a phenomenon. We've now got 50% penetration among adults, but it's tablets that are actually changing the way people are using the internet. In our last communications market report, we reported a quarter of adults now had a tablet computer. In 3 months since then, it's now a third. And it's changing the way people access the internet and what they're using. And particularly some groups. I mean, we saw the social networking seems to have peaked because people are using different applications on their mobile devices, like WhatsApp. But we're seeing things like children, 3 and 4 year olds, who are now using their tablets as one of their sort of key ways of finding out things about the world. In fact, we're going to produce our media literacy report in a few days that looks at children's use of tablets. And there's some amazing behaviour going on that we wouldn't have expected. 8 and 9 year olds are throwing away their mobile phones and taking up tablets instead. And so there's a whole new range of habits. A couple of months ago, we reported in our communications market report about the sort of phenomena of media multi-stacking and media meshing. So it's people taking their smartphones and tablets into their living room while they're watching TV and multitasking with both of them and actually reacting to the television while they're on their device. So we're seeing all sorts of new different behaviours which are coming through that perhaps nobody would have expected with something as boring as the internet. So things are changing very quickly, and in 10 years I don't think we would have expected the rate of change to continue to happen. In our view, it's going to continue even more so, and in 2 years' time when we're at whatever event for the 7th report, it'll be very interesting to see where we've got to.
So thank you very much, all three of you. Grant, I mean, we've heard there sort of really pretty positive reception for the report, but if you like, also a challenge to us to keep up with both humanising the data, giving constantly more insight into the users of the internet rather than the internet itself, also perhaps, you know, asking us how we can hope to keep up with these technological changes. Any comments you want to make before I take any questions from the floor?
Right. Yeah, I think the challenge here is, you point rightly, I think, to the immense diversity and complexity that the internet shows today, and the way that new devices actually and new ways of using the internet are actually increasing that complexity. And that certainly is the research challenge for us. I mean, to abstract out of that, to say it in a sentence, to abstract out of that complexity something that's stable and something that, that is a consistent regularity that we can see across time and across the space of the United Kingdom. And that's one of the challenges here that we try to meet in the report in a variety of ways, with the attempt to talk about the cultures of the internet, some stability in attitudes that we see there as ways in which people think about the internet and the way they approach the internet, despite the advent of new devices and everything. I think we're looking here at the importance of meaning, and I take that as a very useful point to keep in mind. You know, we have issues measuring meaning in a survey, and so we do that by proxy by trying to do this with attitude items. They worked surprisingly well, I think. I was more than a little skeptical when when Bill first proposed this idea, we turn out, as you see in the report, as Bill pointed out, these are attitudes that come out and show differences of 30 and 40 percentage points in the ways people approach the internet and what they do on the internet. And those are remarkable, powerful differences that you don't often see in survey research. So I think this is one of the interesting sort of approaches that I think might bear a considerable fruit in future reports as well. So I'm looking forward to the increased complexity. I mean, I think you're right, James, that the internet has reinvented itself again and again in ways that no one has expected. I mean, who would have anticipated social network sites 10 years ago? This is just, and those transformed the way many people worked with the internet, even if they're becoming passé now among the leading elements of the geekdom here on the internet. I look forward to what's happening in the future and to ways in which, to meeting the sort of challenge that's presented in the internet, finding ways to find things that are stable and regular across the diversity and complexity of the internet.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think we've got about 10 minutes or so I can take some questions or comments from the audience. I've just realised, do I have microphones or do people have to shout? We do. Oh, fantastic. You can put your hand up. I'll probably take 2 or 3 in a row and then get some feedback. So gentlemen, is it Andy? I can't see. If you could say who you are, please, as well.
Hi, I'm Andy. I work at the OII.
He's not a plant, though.
I'm not a plant. My question might make it clear that I'm not a plant. So in large survey research, the factor solution of finding five cultures that you have and having large 30% size differences between them reminds me a lot of the most consistent survey finding you ever find. You find 5 personality factors. So you find introversion, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. And I just quickly drew up a 1-to-1 that works pretty nicely, and the population statistics work out pretty nicely too. So I'm curious about the developmental arc and the stability of these digital cultures, because as a social and personality psychologist, I see a lot of things, and this looks like personality to me.
Wonderful, thank you. I wouldn't mind taking another couple of comments if there are any. If not, we'll just answer that one. Yes, right at the back. Thank you.
This is just a whole separate question. I'm a researcher at the Open University, looking a qualitative researcher actually, so it's very nice to hear that people are interested in those things. And I just wondered if there are any findings on mobile-only internet use. I'm looking at young unemployed people in particular. I wonder if there is any data in there about either mobile or tablet-only, people who weren't using desktop devices at all.
Okay, wonderful. Maybe Grant, let's just answer those 2 and then I'll come back to you over there.
Right. Let me answer the mobile question first, since that's a little bit more straightforward. There are a small number of people who are using mobile access only, but they are a very small number. There's some 34 out of the some 1,800 internet users in the survey. So mobile use is an exception rather than a common practice. A far more common practice is using multiple devices, some of which are mobile. As far as specific questions about unemployed, we don't have any that level of detail is not in the report. If you're interested in it, talk to me afterward. We can see what is possible there from the data itself. As far as the link between personality and the 5 cultures is concerned, certainly this was constructed without any attempt to attach it to personality. And in fact, at various times, we had anywhere from 3 to 7 cultures, depending on the state of the analysis at that moment. I'm fascinated that there actually might be a correspondence here, because I don't know that research at all. I'm a sociologist by background. Bill is a political scientist by training and a communications person by background.
Personality psychologists came across the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
In the 40s, they started giving tests with no idea who people were and where they were coming from. And they went between 3 and 7 and 9. And
Mm-hmm.
they settled on 5 and have replicated it almost
Mm-hmm.
all of the countries.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. We'll talk.
5's just a safe number for any.
It is, yeah. You can't do any better, you can always.
You've always got the middle route.
That's right, yeah, it's
You
always.
can always remember all 5, as you just did.
Before we take another question, I just wanted to, Holly, I mean, do you have anything on sort of mobile-only users? Is that sort of a significant segment of your audiences?
Only to agree with your observation, but if I may, I'd like to take the personality question, because we did, it's now, I think 18 months ago, release a bit of work called the participation choice, and it was a similar sort of area, but we were interested in what drives people to be active or create and contribute online, and we came, I think, with 5 groups. But we too discussing what will be our second wave, and we thought that the link with personality would be one that we should absolutely explore. So I feel like there's a common theme emerging, which, back to your point of stability, could be one that would give us longitudinal strength.
Fantastic. Okay, a couple more questions. So, lady in the middle in the black, thank you.
Hi, Catherine Howe, Curious C on Twitter. So I've just been tweeting Bill. I just wanted to question the use of the word culture as well, actually, from a slightly different perspective, which is that from my perspective as a sociologist, it would have been the idea that there was some sense of common purpose, that there was some shared values between these groups, and that they were behaving in some way collectively. Whereas I can see from what you've been saying and from a skim of the report that you're talking about types of behaviours, but I'm not seeing that you're finding any sense of commonality within these groups. So I guess I'm questioning why you're calling these a culture, 5 cultures, rather than 5 types, or a different kind of classification.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Or should we take that question? No? Grant.
Yeah. I think the rationale for calling them, I wouldn't object really strongly if you wanted to call them types. The rationale for calling them cultures was that they're related to attitudes and to some sense of consistency about the way in which people viewed the internet. And this was related in many respects, we felt, to the sort of symbolic meaning that the internet had for these people. So that's the origin of the idea for cultures. Because of the link to meaning and the symbols.
It predicts behavior, but it's not.
Right.
It's based on attitudinal items, not.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they strongly predict behavior online. So.
Can I?
Yeah.
I think. The word culture obviously also plays well. So it's an attract. It does. But there's also something in it about the separations of the different cultures in terms of engagement with different internet tropes and affordances. So, in fact, the cultures may well diverge slightly just because they are operating using the internet in different ways to create different objects that they then collect around. So calling them culture might actually turn out to be meaningful in 20 years' time.
Good defence, thank you, I like that. We should have said that, okay. Down the back, yes?
Hi, I'm just wondering...
Could you say who you are, sorry, as well?
My name's Damien. It's probably a good idea if I don't say who I am. You can ask me afterwards.
Okay.
I'm just interested in the extent to which, if at all, you think any privacy concerns which have flowed from the recent revelations about security service intervention and encryption techniques are reflected in the survey? And if not, would you anticipate them being reflected in future surveys?
Good question.
And your PGP key is?
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I looked for that explicitly in the survey, and we have a number of questions about privacy and about willingness of people to reveal things about themselves online, and there doesn't seem to be any effect at all. The results for 2013 pretty much track the trends from 2011 and 2009 and earlier. So there doesn't seem to be any particular blip of any increased concern. If anything, the trend has been a declining concern over privacy issues across the survey. And you can look at that. If I'm remembering correctly, that's like page 50 to 52 has a set of graphs on privacy issues.
I did, on the other hand, though, I was just looking at some of the media coverage of this today, and I like the fact that on the Daily Mail online website, their second subheading is Oxford Internet Institute survey found people are concerned about privacy. So, they clearly picked the most interesting finding out of our report there. Yeah.
We print their photographs, home address, and pictures of their children.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that could be said here is that one of the interesting things that comes out is that the usual way in which people think about privacy and age has been young people are much less concerned about privacy than people who are older. It turns out if you look at if you ask people have they actually taken action to somehow protect their privacy, like checking privacy settings, changing privacy settings, something like that, there is an inverse relationship to age. In other words, young people are far more likely to have checked privacy settings or to have changed them than are people who are middle-aged or elderly.
We ought to move on to some comments from two other people, but has anybody got one other burning question before I do so?
Thank you. I'm Dan Such from Nominate Trust. I love Bill's idea that in 5 years' time, non-internet use will be kind of a pretentious choice. But the first two responses were quite positive. I think you both claim kind of the internet is everywhere, everyone's using it. But the report does say that 1 in 5 people still aren't. Can we just kind of try and tally those two perceptions, please? Who's right?
Frankly, we need to sort it out. Get on with it. All of you get on with it. My point was that it has to become unavoidable in the sense that we have constructed society around access to it, like access to electricity or gas or clean water. So, in fact, there isn't a choice. Rather, what will be left will be the people who deliberately choose to be offline. They're the ones who are pretentious. All of those people who are currently denied access for whatever reason, we need to solve that as a priority. But I believe that's an issue that just will go away. It can't not go away. I refuse to accept that it won't go away.
Do you want to comment on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a big preoccupation for us, and we spend a lot of time thinking about these issues. I mean, the biggest group of those who are not accessing the internet are older and lack confidence and don't see the relevance of it. And some of them don't even can't get it either, particularly in rural areas, which is why rollout of broadband is going to help. And there need to be, positive interventions, whether at government level or local authority or even family level, to get those people to see the benefits, because the internet is an experience good. You only see the benefits when you're actually using it. And I suppose there are another group who are not accessing because of the cost. And whether it's a sort of younger, more transient population or older people as well. But that can be fixed too. The cost is coming down. But I think my personal perspective on this is that the solution is looking at us now, which is around mobile devices and tablets, because as people are put off by a big desktop computer in their room, tablets offer a way of getting to use the internet relatively cheaply and easily. And I think tablets are going to be crucial to driving this change in the next few years.
Oh, your Grant?
I don't know. I have 2 or 3 impressions here. I guess I would start out with the observation that even telephone usage did not reach 100%. And telephones are a much, much simpler technology than the internet. So the question is not really, is internet use going to reach 100%, but where is it going to stabilize? And it will be well below 100%. I think, broadly speaking, there are a lot of people who really don't need the internet, and I think of people who are elderly in care homes. All their friends are right there with them, and they may not feel like this complicated technology is something they want to spend time with. I think there's a broader issue here, which in the language of social science research, are we looking at an age effect or a cohort effect when we're looking at the fact that older people tend not to be online? That's actually an interesting question that I think now that we have 10 years of data, we can actually look at that seriously with OxIS data. I don't know that anyone has a definitive answer to whether which is happening. And finally, I think I just note here in terms of tablet use and mobile phone use, and for that matter, reader use, that those are following the same sort of trends that we've seen in other new electronic devices, that they're used first by people who are young, wealthy, and well-educated. And they only are used eventually by people who are older, poorer, and less well-educated some years later. So the diffusion trend is not suggesting that there are going to be a lot of people coming online because there are tablets available.
I disagree with tablets because the take-up is so quick. It's the fastest growing
technology. It's very quick.
We've seen for a long time.
The 2015 report. We'll be looking forward to it.
But only if you sponsor it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that note, I want to thank all of you great panellists for your comments, your thoughtful insights into the report. Grant, for coming up and answering some of the questions. That was really, really excellent, helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Dan and John to come up. Where is John? Yeah, okay. Yes, if you could speak at the podium.
Yeah, thank you. So after such a rigorous and deliberate piece of research, an important piece of research, some hastily gathered together responses to a quick read and points to the panel. I think that there are 2 things that I'd like to discuss very briefly. The first was one of Bill's opening remarks, which was about the challenge to new digital innovation, where such a large group of internet users are in the moderate group. So Nominate Trust is a social investor and a grant funder, and we invest and support organisations who try to use digital technology to address social challenges. Now, developing digital businesses is one thing, and it's really difficult to get businesses off the ground, even with all the wonderful digital tools that are available. But developing social digital ventures is equally, if not perhaps more, tricky. And it's interesting to think about the sorts of people who might be trying to set up those businesses, the sorts of people we're trying to support, if such a large proportion of users are in this moderate group. I think there's perhaps a challenge across maybe even the economy, but certainly across the social sector, to think about how and who we work with to try and support people to use digital technology as effectively as possible to create new ventures and new businesses that address social issues. And I think those classifications and those cultures help us hone a bit more about the sorts of people we need to support. But there's a second part that kind of links to that, which is, again, it's reinforced through the report, the importance of perceptions and attitudes to the internet in how people take up or how people use the internet. And again, I love Bill's idea that internet use will be a pretentious choice in a few years' time. But at the moment, I think it's reinforced the importance of people's motivations to get online are perhaps more important than many of the other things we've been looking at around the cost of access, the place of access, etc. Those are still important factors, but the motivation seems key. So again, linking from from such rigorous report to two anecdotes. The first is, this time last year, we just finished a tour called My Digital Planet, which was a great big celebration of how the internet can be useful to people across the world. And there's a story of Ron that I've just tweeted about if you want to follow up in more detail. He was an 85-year-old who had no interest in the internet, couldn't understand how it was relevant to him, but seeing some pictures interested him. He came and had a chat. And then throughout the week, he spent 5 days coming to a centre just to look about photography and painting, which were his passions. And all of a sudden, he started to get really passionate about how we could use technology because of his own interests. And there's something about how we can learn from that to inform the way in which we design interventions to support those who aren't yet online. Maybe that 20%, just so we can leave the 5% pretentious, that's fine. The other thing is just last Wednesday, I was with Bill and a lot of other people looking at some of the most inspiring examples of social tech innovation from across the world. There are so many amazing possibilities in how we can use digital to address social challenges. And I left that meeting completely inspired by some of the things that are going on. So I wonder now how we can take that sort of inspiration, that sort of enthusiasm, and turn it into some design principles around how we support others to get online, but those that aren't online yet. So I think my challenge is, how might we use the cultures you set out, or maybe the personality types, how might we use those as the start of a design process to develop new interventions that support those who aren't yet online? Because maybe we expect there to be a hierarchy, maybe even the cultures as a hierarchy, that you start at one place and you work all the way up until you're an avid user. But I'm wondering how we can take this sort of insight and develop design principles to address the 20%, as well as using those cultures to think about how we better support people to use technology to address some of the bigger social challenges that we're facing. That's what I'm left to think about. It's a fascinating piece of work, so thank you very much for all the effort that's gone into it and the conversations we've had about it. I look forward to reading it in more depth.
Hello. It's a challenge to be given the privilege of what I think are the final words. I'm John Farrington. I was director of .Rural, one of the 3 digital economy RCUK research hubs at Aberdeen University. I stepped down in January in order to be able to try and do some research, and it's going reasonably well. A highlight of that has been this involvement that we've had with the Oxford Internet Institute. It started, I'll be brief, it started 2 years ago, to the day I think, when I began a 3-month visiting position at OII. And that was so inspirational, and then following that, this is how .Rural became involved in part of OxIS, which was looking particularly at rural dimensions, and that's what we spent the day talking about, as I think James alluded to earlier on. That's fascinating in itself, but I'm not here to talk about that. We'll be reporting in due course. I'm glad I'm not picking the same points as you did. They're smaller points. They're not as big as yours. Bill, I was really reassured by what you were saying about the world being the internet and the internet being the world. I started writing a paper about internet rights 2 years ago, and I haven't finished it yet, and now I understand why, because I'm writing about the world. So that is reassuring, but of course it's true. It is pervasive, it is ubiquitous, but not everyone is included, as we know. Holly, I like particularly your, if I may say, your emphasis on vignettes and the qualitative or the narrative or those discourses, and we seek to, I think, incorporate those in our rural work, and obviously talk to Bill and Grant and so on about that later on. And James, talking about tablets and so on, yes, I think that the big thing you said, James, was the rate of change, and it's accelerating, so we've got a geometric rate. We know that. It's just going to continue exploding. The Internet of Things is going to absolutely mushroom Internet as we know it. So that's at least one dimension in which we know it will grow. So, on that note, I'm confident that OII will keep up with that rate of change, but not only that, probably anticipate it. And I just congratulate OII and its other sponsors on the work it's done. It's been a privilege to be involved. Final note is much more interesting. There are drinks and reception immediately outside here. On behalf of Bill, OII, Helen, all at OII, all the participants, all the sponsors, I thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.